Welcome back, Richard. It's good to see you.
Good morning. Happy, what is it, December, middle of December?
Yeah, it's the week before the big weekend. The week
Yeah,
before.
barreling toward the end of another month.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And in this time of year, there's a lot of celebration. There's a lot of excitement and activity going on, but there's also a lot of stress.
Right? Yeah,
This time of year, and we this is the bridge to the topic that we have for today,
right, right.
um, which came a couple of articles we were reading over the course of this past week or so, and found some really interesting things talking about just where we are in mental health, where we are in society, where we are about how we feel about different things. And we've talked before about our concerns about diagnoses and just the case of everybody having a diagnosis and everybody being concerned that they have a diagnosis, but yet there's also a lot of stress and a lot of challenges that we're experiencing societally. And so we thought we would talk a little bit about some of that today.
Right. Yeah, because people, these topics of, do I have ADHD? Is this depression? I'm feeling very anxious. Does my partner have OCD?
Yeah.
All of that comes with, we tend to think of these things as individual personal disorders, but it might be that we're just living in very stressful times and we're simply reacting to the environmental stressors that we know are all around us today,
Oh, yeah.
income insecurity and that sort of thing. And that also contributes to these feelings. So it may not be we may not have to move toward a specific psychiatric diagnosis. It could be something else at work. And this is a good time of year because certainly the pressure increases. We said a few weeks ago in a podcast that, most of us are already overextended. And then you add a major holiday to that.
Right.
We just don't have you don't have the time, or you don't have the time to do all that that you're asking yourself to do.
Absolutely. I was talking to a patient earlier this week, and she's kind of experiencing a dip in her mood. It's a little bit of
Right.
depression. And she says, I have no idea why. And we paused, and I just, there's a lot happening right now. There's, with between family, between the holidays and the way that you're expected to, feel, and then the way that you actually feel, and thinking about the past and the future. There's
Mhm.
so much that happens right now that, yeah,
Right.
we're under so much stress,
Right.
and stress sometimes that we put ourselves under, with
Exactly. Yeah.
expectations that we feel like we have to meet.
Right.
That, yeah, we all are at risk for taking a bit of a dip in our mood this time of year.
Right. Right. But it may not be that you have a diagnosis. It could just be the stress around you.
Yeah.
Yeah, people who have, December 15th was for most people the last day of school before the holiday
Right.
season begins. And you can see parents of young children, they just wanted to make it across that finish line and have a huge sigh of relief because, okay, we made it through the last week of school before the Christmas holiday. And it's like there's this cumulative sigh of relief you could hear go up in all these parents.
Yeah,
So
I was meeting with a mother on Friday, and I said, "So are you ready for the holiday break?" And she says, "I have until 3 o'clock. Get as much done as I can." So
that's
she
right.
just had just a few hours left before the kids would be home for the.
And they're going to descend for 2 weeks, and it just becomes busier. They struggle to get through the end of the first semester, but then they have these 2 weeks of increased activity. So
Right.
there's no relief in sight.
Well, but I think that that's a great segue to the real focus of what we're going to talk about today, which is,
Right.
in this time that we're living in, where there's so much societal and environmental stress.
Mhm.
One of the groups that we don't necessarily think of immediately when it comes to some of this is teachers. You know, we're talking about students and we're talking about parents, but the person in between or involved in all of that oftentimes is the teacher. And there's a great article from the National Education Association. It's written by Tim Walker, and it's entitled "My Empathy Felt Drained:
Right.
Educators Struggle with Compassion Fatigue."
Mhm.
And, you know, we think about compassion fatigue when it comes to like medical professionals and sort of people on the front line of medical care and trauma care. Um, but I think that thinking about compassion fatigue fits very well with thinking about teachers.
That's right. We tend to think of compassion fatigue, which is different from burnout.
Right.
Burnout and compassion fatigue are different. Um, Burnout's far more serious, but compassion fatigue
Hmm.
is unrelenting, and we typically associate it with first responders, firefighters, police, or ER physicians and nurses who are or soldiers, combat people in combat who experience this day after day after day after day, and you get this thing called compassion fatigue, which is a state of exhaustion and dysfunction, and you feel it in your body, you feel it in your emotions, and you feel it in your relationships. It comes from that prolonged exposure to stress,
Right.
wherever the stress is coming from, and it's the cost of caring.
Yeah.
Most most nurses, doctors, police officers, firefighters, they do care. They are invested, but the cost of caring can be compassion fatigue, and it's mostly this feeling of this deadness, this exhaustion, and a loss. You have a loss of interest in helping others, and feelings of hopelessness because it's just like patient after patient, problem after problem after problem, and you think, how I just can't keep going.
Right.
So we typically associate that with healthcare professionals.
Right.
But what we're becoming aware of now is that teachers
Hmm.
also experiencing what we have to consider as compassion fatigue.
Absolutely, because you know, again, if we think about the way that things are supposed to be, the way that things always have been, and the way that things typically are, is that teachers do really care about their students.
That's right.
And when you're thinking about compassion fatigue, what we're really talking about is that the stress that comes from being a caregiver or a companion or a person that is nurturing or taking care of someone else. And
Mhm.
that's why it's healthcare professionals and those kind of and first responders and things. But it makes sense for teachers as well because teachers are responsible, you know, who is responsible for teaching your child or making sure that your kid is getting the skills and knowledge and information that he or she needs.
Right.
It's the teacher, and all of the blame when a child doesn't succeed, so much of the blame has more recently been shifted towards the teacher. And so teachers do their best, and then when it doesn't work out, or when, let's just be honest, sometimes the student doesn't do what he or she is supposed to do,
Mm.
the teacher is still the one to get blamed.
That's right.
And
And
this has been going on for a while, even before the pandemic.
exactly, that started back in the 90s when they called it educational reform, and the idea was is we're going to evaluate teacher effectiveness, okay? And if your students don't make a certain amount of progress, then you might have a salary reduction, you might lose your job, you might have to be supervised. It may not, it's not the teachers don't have that kind of control.
Mhm.
But yet what happened during those years of No Child Left Behind and high stakes testing, and we're going to evaluate teacher effectiveness, is that it was teachers were put in the spotlight and said, well, it must be the teacher's fault
Right,
if the kids aren't making adequate progress. And it may well be that it's not the teacher's fault.
right,
But suddenly teachers were thrust into this position. Today, we see the same thing happening with librarians,
right,
where suddenly where there's all this news about librarians and allowing banned books to be on shelves. But so we shine the spotlight on teachers and librarians and other workers, um, and now everybody's they start to complain about teachers, and it's the teacher's fault.
Right.
That creates that spotlight creates compassion fatigue.
Absolutely. And if you think about all the things that we ask teachers to do,
That's
um,
right.
we ask them to teach students. And again, let's just say it. Let's call it for what it is. Oftentimes, we're asking teachers to teach students things that students don't want to learn, don't necessarily want to learn. Um, there wouldn't be a huge line at the door for eighth graders who want to learn algebra. There's just that's not going to be a long line.
Mhm.
Yet they're we're expecting teachers to teach a lot of these students algebra. So the students aren't really interested, but yet the teachers are responsible for teaching this, and the teachers are responsible for managing their behavior, and the teachers are responsible for making sure that all the other students are safe from all the other students.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and teachers are responsible for mitigating and managing students' emotions and stressors because of things that are happening at the student's home that the
Right.
teacher has no idea what's going on or how to make. So teachers are in this state where we're asking them to do all these things. All the while, we're
Mhm.
living in a culture that is devaluing education,
Right.
devaluing learning. Uh,
Mhm.
it's putting, sort of celebrity and exaggerated lifestyles as the top goal over any other type of achievement, certainly academic achievement.
Mhm.
Um, you know, Electronics and social media over any face-to-face interactions or physical activity. I
Yeah.
mean, we're living in a time where everything or very much of the things that we're doing in life works against what we're trying to accomplish or
Absolutely.
say we're trying to accomplish.
When you think of what we ask, before you criticize a teacher, think about what we're asking them to do. Think about the challenge that every teacher is facing
Right.
in, in today's culture, in our country's culture. And you mentioned several, um, we devalue learning.
Right.
We see it. We saw it with the pandemic that we don't believe in science. We're not going to listen to the scientists. We're going to Well, if you don't listen to the scientists, who are you going to listen to? Um,
Richard,
we
how can there be so many people on whether it's on TikTok or YouTube or wherever, so many people like arguing for flat Earth? Like
right.
it that is gaining a following. Like that it makes no sense. But we're valuing this sensationalism
Right.
instead of looking at true science and just goodness, the reality of the world around us.
Right. Right.
We're believing in flat Earth.
Yeah. Which we discovered 500 or 600 years ago that it's not flat.
Right.
We didn't sail off the end of the earth, but yet that's coming back, So we don't value science, we don't value knowledge, we value celebrities, we value, if you talk to most middle school kids, what do you want to do when you grow up? 9 times out of 10, I want to be an influencer.
Hmm.
That looks like the easiest thing to do is just,
Right.
I don't have to go to college. I don't even have to finish high school.
Yeah.
I want to be an influencer. I want
Yeah.
to play video games. I want to be a professional video game player and have
YouTuber.
people pay to watch me play.
Yeah.
Um, when you talk about electronics and social media, that's where youngsters are today. Um, and so we have kids coming in who have no real intention about learning anything. They don't want to be there, number
Right.
one. They think it's a waste of time. There's too much dead time when they go to school. How many times have you heard kids say, well, I can do homeschooling in 3 hours.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I have to sit in school for 7 hours and waste
Right.
my life.
Right.
That's how they see it. It's a waste.
Right.
We tend to treat teachers with derision. We treat them more like house servants than professionals. But
Yeah.
of course, we treat other professionals that way, physicians or nurses.
Right.
But people don't think twice about abusing or questioning them. So it's not just teachers. We don't pay teachers enough. So they're devalued that way. Um, and so and now we have a new phenomenon where teachers are being threatened,
Right.
coerced by elected officials to do what they're told to do. That's run amok in Florida recently, where teachers have been intimidated and threatened if they don't do what they're told to do, not for educational
Right.
reasons, but for cultural reasons.
Right. And what's fascinating is that the just the I don't even know what word to use about it, but at the same time we're stressing and emphasizing the importance of preparing teachers and educators to be trauma informed.
Right.
We're not even recognizing sometimes the trauma that we're putting them through by,
Right.
I couldn't imagine being a teacher on a campus where a student or someone brings a gun to school.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be terrifying.
Right.
I couldn't imagine being in a position where you know that if you say a certain words, that your entire career could be taken from you.
You could lose your license for saying the wrong word.
Right.
I,
Like, and for people who have had, difficult upbringings, difficult lives, you add those kinds of threats and demands on them, that it can be very triggering. It can be very, it can be very traumatic for them.
that's right. So you see this teacher who has this impossible, she has all these students coming in who don't want to be there,
Mhm.
who aren't going to do what they're asked to do. They have no intention of learning anything. They want to be on their phones. They want to be on their devices. What and they're resisting instead of cooperating, they're resisting. So they have the students on one hand, angry parents, and now you have elected officials who are threatening them because of the language that they use.
Right.
So these teachers are in this very, very almost an untenable
Hmm.
position. And it's little wonder that they begin to experience compassion fatigue because they're getting it from every corner. I don't know what it's like. And Bernie, you know some teachers, and you were in the district recently. I don't know what it does to teachers for them to watch a school board meeting where parents are in there screaming about banning books or whatever these personal agendas that individual parents have. What does it do to teachers' morale when they see those uh, I don't even know what to call them, where parents are just screaming at school board members or school board members are screaming back?
Right.
It's like,
Yeah, I mean, it's very demoralizing, and it's very difficult because you certainly have those teachers who, like we have said many times before, this is what we're arguing about, but there's all of these other problems. There's
right.
all of these other issues that we should be dealing with, but we're talking about, whether or not we should ban this book.
Mhm.
That, if we really look at it, 5 students in the past year have checked out.
Right.
We're going to spend an entire school board meeting talking about that book.
Right.
So yeah, it's very demoralizing. So, but
Yeah, there was an article published this week about Florida's SAT score, the SAT score, SAT, Scholastic Aptitude.
yeah,
Florida ranks 47th in the country. We're one of the wealthiest states in the country. We rank 47th. Nobody's addressing
right.
why did that happen? Why is it that one of the wealthiest states in the country
Mhm.
ranks 47th on a college preparatory to a college entrance exam?
Yeah,
Who's talking about that?
right.
But we're talking about other things. There's a lot of passion about some things, but what about that? What about the achievement of these kids? These are high school kids who we're trying to prepare them for something after high school,
Something.
and we rank 47th,
Right.
but
Yeah.
nobody's
Yeah.
nobody's talking
Nobody's
about
talking
that.
about those things. But
Right.
so when it comes to teachers and their experience of compassion fatigue, I think that, certainly individually they could use support and some assistance and talking with them, whether it's a mental health professional or a coach or something, to
Right.
help them through some of it. But there's things that the rest of us can do as well. And I think one of the important things is we need to stop. We need to take a deep breath, step back, and just stop blaming teachers, my
Right.
goodness, for everything.
Right.
We act as though teachers are in the classroom, and in walk, kids who have completely clean slates that aren't influenced by anything else in the world, and they're walking in eager to learn, eager to gain whatever information the teacher is going to present, and just is ready to absorb it all. As long as the teacher does his or her job, they're all ready for it. And it's just not the case.
That's right. That's right.
What-
And and the biggest problem is whatever exists outside the school exists inside the school. We've talked about that for 2 generations now,
Yeah,
that you can't keep the culture out of this out of the classroom. And it doesn't matter whether it's TikTok or Snapchat or Minecraft or an AR-15. Whatever is outside the school is inside the school. And teachers and principals have to deal with that.
right,
Kids bring that kids bring that into the school.
right,
There's no invisible shield around a school.
right,
What's outside the school is inside the school. Doesn't matter whether it's drugs, guns, rap music. What exists outside comes inside. And teachers simply can't control that. They have no control over that. There's
right,
no way that they can control that.
right.
We have a law in Florida, you can't have a cell phone in the classroom. They do anyway. I mean,
Right.
you just can't police these kinds of things.
Well,
Teachers can't be expected to police that.
and what's so just funny, but not like haha funny, but just ironic funny is that so many parents will complain about their kids' cell phone use
Yeah,
and managing all of those things and their access to all that stuff. But then they get upset with the teachers if the teachers, when the students aren't doing what they tell them to do or aren't behaving the way that they're supposed to behave. And it's like, you have, 2 kids, you have 3 kids, and you're having a hard time managing them, you know, the, in middle and high school, those teachers have, 150 students, and you want them to manage 150 students
right,
and get them to all behave the way that they're supposed to and do exactly what they're supposed to. I mean, it
right.
just, and you can't even make the argument, well, they're trained. No, it doesn't matter how well you're trained.
No.
When it's 150 against one, even if
Those are
they're
good
coming
odds,
25
right?
at a time, it doesn't
Right.
matter.
That's right. And those kids have all the same stressors that they bring from home. I mean, they have all the same stressors that everybody has. So
Right,
it's not like they're quiet, cooperative, eager little learners. No, they're bringing in all the stuff that exists outside the classroom, outside the school building.
right.
Yep.
Now,
Um,
another thing, so we can help by, kind of pulling back and stop blaming teachers for all of this. The other thing is we have to recognize some things that sort of on the political side perhaps have contributed in,
right.
whether that's, we've talked about No Child Left Behind before, and
Mhm.
the consequences of that perspective. Because Richard, I don't know when the last time you talked to anybody about Nickleby, but I just had someone recently, share with me that they still believe that, like, every student, meaning every student, should be able to read at a third grade level by the end of third grade.
Mhm.
And we have to you have to explain statistics. Like, it's not possible
Right.
for every student to be able to read at a third grade level at the end of third grade. I mean, there are students, and I'm sorry, folks, for those of you who this is hard for, but there are some students who won't learn to read
Because they can't.
because they can't.
Right. That's correct. Mhm.
Now, we have lots of strategies to help with it, but there will be some students who will not learn to read.
That's right. And it's not always the teacher's fault.
Right,
But yet teachers were held accountable for doing the impossible.
right,
And they were punished. Schools and teachers were punished if those students weren't reading at a certain grade level, something the teacher has no control over. If a student can't read, or a student decides he's not going to learn to read, there
right,
is absolutely nothing a teacher can do about that.
right,
That's there's nothing that they can do.
right.
Um,
Absolutely.
Learning is a voluntary process. It's a process that takes active participation. And if a student decides not to, there's nothing that anybody can do about that, parents or teachers. Okay.
Right. Now,
Um,
another political side of things is, when we keep thinking about tax cuts and where funding goes,
mhm,
we send an awful lot of funding to certain things in our society and in our culture, but education isn't necessarily one of them.
No, it's not a priority.
In fact, some of these voucher systems do the exact opposite, and they're taking money out of the public education system.
Right. Yep. Every election cycle, and we have a big election cycle coming up in 2024. Every election cycle, you hear people running for office talk about taxes and tax cuts. And what you have to remember is that taxes support education, police, fire, the infrastructure, rebuilding roads, rebuilding bridges. When taxes are cut, educators get hit first and hardest because school budgets get reduced, and there's no way to make extra money. And so now we have these voucher systems, and they're failing in many states of Arizona, for example, many states who have already implemented vouchers, because what's happening is money is taken out of the school budget and given to individuals who may or may not need that money. In Florida, there's no income requirement. You can make a $50,000 a month, and you're still entitled to that $8,000.
Right.
But the 8,000 is taken from somewhere. Where is it taken? It's taken from the school budget, which is already insufficient. Okay.
Right.
We don't pay our teachers enough. We don't pay our cafeteria workers. We don't pay our bus drivers enough. These are people who do this valuable service and who are underpaid and undervalued. So every time a politician talks about tax cut, my skin kind of crawls because I think, oh, well, that's another hit to the school system.
Right. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And that's another, just one of those big issues that we could do to help with this compassion fatigue is, thinking about our elected officials and how they're not supporting teachers the way
right,
that the teachers need to be supported. That,
right.
they're seen more as opposition.
Yeah,
They're seen more as, adversaries than they are
right.
seen as people that we need to support and allies that are working, you know, working for the same goals and missions that we're all working for.
Right. I think of all of our elected officials at every level, I mean, from school board to governor, it doesn't matter. If you're an elected official, part of your responsibility is to make things better, whether it's education or it doesn't matter what it is. Your job is to make things better. But recently, it's like the elected officials are the biggest critics. Instead of helping to, what can we do to make your job better? What can we do to make your life better? Instead, it's the elected officials who are becoming some of the severest, fiercest critics of these frontline educators, these classroom teachers.
Absolutely. And I think that the last thing that we can consider or should think about is, we live in a society, as we've talked about, that has all of this other influence, that has all this other noise that
Mhm.
is just affecting our everyday. And even those of you who are not in education, who don't have school age kids, you experience it as well. It's the stress of it's like the nonsense that, okay, now let's argue about CRT. Now let's argue about, this issue or that issue, issues that really don't affect our lives at all. But let's have these huge debates and arguments and fights about it. So we live in this sort of disordered culture,
Mhm.
and we expect teachers to work and function as if they're living in, this pure environment where, again, everything is easy and just readily available whenever
Right.
you want it. And it just isn't the case. And so we need to support them as opposed to threatening them and seeing them as adversaries.
Right. You mentioned, I forgot about critical race theory. I forgot
Yeah,
all that noise, all that consternation about critical race theory. But in the meantime, we have all these real problems
right,
that nobody's addressing, and we have a fake problem, critical race theory, that gets all the attention and all the attention and all the passion.
right,
That's not where we should be putting the attention and the passion. We should be putting it in real places. And teachers and librarians are not the enemy.
right,
Um, n- Nobody should have the ability to threaten or coerce or intimidate teachers or librarians. We should be supporting,
Right.
working with, let them do their jobs. Let's all support them to do this very, very difficult job that
Yeah.
we're asking them to do.
Right. Absolutely. So as we wrap up, of course, the idea that we're trying to share here today is that, educating our kids is tough.
Yeah.
Um,
Jeez.
and and I'm telling you, there's I to often tell my friends and family, there is no way. I couldn't see myself working
I
in
know.
any of the classrooms that I see and hear about, and it would just be incredibly challenging. And so, instead of working against some of these people that we put a lot of trust in teachers. And
I'm t-
if we're going to trust them at the
right,
level that we need to trust them, then we need to believe that they're going to do what they need to do, that what they've been trained to do, what they are teachers to do.
mhm,
We need to believe in that, and we need to let them do their work. And
right,
if they tell us that there's a problem, if they tell us that there's an issue, let's listen to them and believe them and support them instead of say, well, what are you doing to make that happen?
right. That's right. Yeah.
It's not their
Yeah,
fault.
I taught middle school years and years and years ago, but it was before cell phones. It was before social media. My job was almost easy. I had parental support. I had administrative support. I
Yeah,
didn't feel any pressure from anybody except to do my job. I knew that I was expected to do this job. I never felt pressure from anybody to do my job. I can't imagine what it's like for teachers today because they're getting pressure from so many sources while they're being asked to do this almost impossible task of educating kids, many of whom don't want to be there.
right. Absolutely. And then we expect them to, pay for their own materials
Oh,
and, you know,
God.
and take additional time, outside of their lives to
Mhm.
prepare and but teachers do that because they care. And
Because they care. That's
we
right.
have to recognize that and support our teachers. And, again, they have one of the most important jobs and one of the most difficult jobs, and we can at least do some things that we can do to make it a little bit more manageable for them. So
Do what we can to make their lives better and easier. Yeah.
absolutely. So think about that as we are finishing up this first semester of the school year and finishing up this 2023 and getting ready for January and
Right.
getting started with the last half of the school year.
We have another opportunity to get it right in the second half of the year. So
Absolutely. All right. Well, that is it for today. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.